What if the hotel maid no one noticed was the only person who could save a billionaire's deal, and she did it with just one sentence? When Emily quietly stepped forward and spoke fluent German, the entire lobby froze. She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't even supposed to speak. But what she said changed everything. From a mop in her hand to a job offer that shook the hotel to its core. This isn't just about language. It's about courage. And what happened next will leave you speechless. Stay to the end. You won't believe who tried to take her down and who lifted her up. Nobody at the Astoria Grand Hotel in New York City could understand the man standing at the center of the marble-floored lobby. Tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a sharply tailored charcoal suit, Nathan Beck, the elusive German tech billionaire, had just arrived for the International Investment Conference, and chaos followed him like a shadow. Spanish-English, the hotel director, Mr. Edward Collins, tried nervously. Nathan only responded with a curt sentence in German, shaking his head in frustration. The language barrier was immediate and absolute. Staff fumbled. Receptionists whispered. Cameras from early press arrivals flicked on discreetly. The air was thick with embarrassment. No one could help the guest of honor, except for one woman. At the far end of the lobby near the velvet rope, cordoning off the VIP area, Emily Rivera, a housekeeper in a faded gray uniform, knelt to clean a coffee spill left by a careless guest. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was somewhere else, entirely staring straight at Nathan Beck. Not in awe, in recognition. Hidden under the clean towels in her janitor's cart was a worn-out book, Die Verwandlung by Franz Kafka, in German. She had read it at least 10 times. Not because she was assigned to, but because once in another life she had lived in Germany. 8 years in Munich, working as a live-in housekeeper while studying comparative literature at university. Fluent in German, fluent in silence, fluent in being invisible. Until now, she heard the whispers. If we can't solve this, he might cancel the conference. This is a disaster. Her fingers trembled. Her heart pounded. She looked down at the floor she had just polished and saw her own reflection. I'm just the cleaning lady, she whispered to herself. But something inside her cracked open. She stood, straightened her back, and walked past shocked staff, past her fuming supervisor, Derek Shaw, past the director still fumbling with his phone for a translation app. She walked right up to Nathan Beck and said calmly in flawless German, "Would you like a tea with cinnamon? The ones here are excellent, might calm you after your long journey." The room froze. Conversation stopped mid-word. Nathan blinked, startled, then he smiled. His whole posture shifted like a lock clicking open. Das wäre wunderbar. Endlich jemand, der mich versteht. That would be wonderful. Finally someone who understands me. Everyone stared. Mr. Collins gawked. Derek's jaw visibly clenched. Emily didn't flinch. When the director finally managed to stammer, "Wait, how do you speak German?" she answered without a trace of apology. "I lived in Munich for 8 years. I worked for a family there while studying at university." Nathan turned to her with interest. "Where in Munich, Schwabing?" Near the university, she said, her voice steady. In seconds, Emily was no longer just the housekeeper. She was the one person who could unlock the conference, who could make the most powerful man in the room feel at ease. By the time the others recovered from their shock, Mr. Collins had already said, "Miss Rivera, would you please accompany Mr. Beck to his suite? You'll serve as his interpreter during his stay." Derek cut in, flustered. "Sir, she still has to finish cleaning the lobby and the second-floor restrooms?" "No," Mr. Collins said sharply. "Assign someone else. Miss Rivera will stay with Mr. Beck." Emily nodded once and walked beside the billionaire toward the elevator. But she could feel eyes stabbing into her back, could hear the whispers already brewing. Inside the elevator, Nathan glanced at her and said quietly, "It's strange, isn't it? How fast people change the way they look at you." She looked up at him, surprised. "Yes, very strange. But I'm still the same person." Nathan smiled again. "Exactly. That's the paradox. The world shifts, and suddenly they see someone new. But you've been that person all along." When they arrived at the presidential suite, Emily was momentarily struck by how different the room felt. Not because she hadn't been in it before she had countless times as cleaning staff, but because now she entered as a guest's equal. "Miss Rivera," Nathan said, pausing, "What did you study comparative literature?" she replied. "I was one semester away from graduating before I came back to care for my mother." There was a silence. Then he asked, "Have you ever considered finishing?" Her breath caught. "It's complicated." But before she could explain, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. "When you're done with Mr. Beck, bathrooms still need mopping. Don't think you're anyone special." She felt her stomach twist. Nathan watched her closely. "Is something wrong?" Emily forced a smile. Nothing that hasn't always been there. But in her heart, something had changed. A door had opened. A voice long buried had spoken its first words, and it wasn't going back to silence again. What would you have done in Emily's place? Would you have dared to speak up or stayed silent? That night, Emily lay awake on her mattress in the tiny apartment she shared with her younger sister Sophie and their mother Maria. A single bulb flickered in the hallway, and the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Her uniform hung neatly on the door hook, as it always did. Except tonight, everything felt different. Or maybe it was Emily who had changed. She reached over and pulled out her old folder, the one she hadn't touched in over a year. Inside were documents from Columbia University admission records, scholarship approvals, and the letter she never sent asking for a leave of absence. It had been so long since she allowed herself to believe she might finish school. So long since she'd let herself want more. Sophie stirred from the other mattress, still half asleep. "You okay?" she mumbled. Emily paused. "Yeah," she whispered. "I just had a weird day. Weird good or weird like Derek. Yelling at you again, kind of weird." Emily gave a soft laugh. "Weird like someone finally saw me." The next morning when Emily walked back into the Astoria Grand, the air seemed different. Some people nodded politely. Others looked away quickly, their expressions unreadable. Derek didn't say a word, just handed her a clipboard and walked off. But the silence was loud. Too loud. Later that afternoon, she accompanied Nathan Beck to a private strategy session in the hotel's executive lounge. Executives, journalists, investors, everyone was there. When Nathan introduced her as his personal language and cultural liaison, the room reacted as if he'd appointed Cinderella to the board of directors. Emily didn't flinch. She translated flawlessly, adapted subtle nuances in tone, and caught cultural cues others didn't. By the time the meeting ended, several CEOs were whispering her name to their assistants. But Emily wasn't listening to that. She was watching Mr. Collins, the hotel director, whose forced smile said everything his mouth didn't. Afterward, Nathan asked if she'd ever considered working full-time in communications. Emily hesitated. "I wouldn't know where to start. I didn't finish. Degrees matter," Nathan said, "but talent matters more. And you have both. I'm opening a new satellite office here. I want someone local, someone who understands more than just language. Think about it." She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted to say yes. But the minute she stepped into the hotel's service corridor, reality came flooding back. Derek was waiting for her near the staff locker room. So he said, arms crossed, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Big star now, huh? I don't want trouble," Emily said calmly. "Well, you've got it anyway," he snapped. "Ramirez wants to see you. And bring your things." Emily walked into Mr. Collins' office with her heart pounding. Miss Rivera Collins began pacing slowly. "You've overstepped. You were hired as housekeeping, not as a translator, not as a communications consultant, and certainly not as a representative of this hotel." "I was asked by the guest himself," Emily said carefully. "Yes, and we can all thank you for not creating a public incident," he replied coldly. "But from here forward, you're not to speak to Mr. Beck unless assigned." Clear Emily met his gaze. "Is this about protocol or ego?" Collins froze. "Excuse me, I've done nothing wrong. And I think you're threatened because a housekeeper solved a problem none of your managers could." His lips tightened. "Pack your things. You're suspended. Effective immediately." She stepped out, fists clenched, her mind spinning. But before she could process it all, Sophie called. Their mother had fainted again. The medication wasn't working. They had to take her to St. Grace Memorial, and the hospital bill was already stacking up. That night, Emily sat beside her mother's bed as the monitors beeped gently in the background. Maria, ever calm, squeezed her hand. "Did something happen at work?" she asked, reading Emily's face. Emily nodded slowly. I stood up for myself. I think that's what they can't forgive. Maria smiled faintly. Then don't regret it. Sometimes, Mija, the first time you speak your truth, the world tries to silence you louder. But that doesn't mean you stop speaking. The next morning, Emily received a message from a private number. If you're free for coffee today, I'd like to talk. Nathan. They met at a quiet cafe near Central Park. He had already ordered tea and a warm slice of cinnamon apple pie. I heard about the suspension, he said. Emily looked down, cheeks flushed. I guess I broke the invisible wall. Or you exposed it, he countered. I meant what I said. I want you on my team, full-time, full benefits, insurance, educational support, relocation if needed. Emily stared at him. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Nathan smiled. Or take time and then say yes. But as she reached for the tea, her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from Derek, but it wasn't meant for her. He'd accidentally sent a screenshot from a staff group chat. She saw her name, saw the mocking comments, saw the image they'd taken from the hotel's security cam, labeling her maid-turned-trophy translator. Nathan must have seen her expression change. What is it, he asked. She showed him the screen. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he stood. Come with me. That afternoon, Nathan returned to the Astoria Grand, not as a guest, but as a man on a mission. Emily followed quietly beside him. Inside the director's office, Nathan spoke with sharp calm. Miss Rivera will no longer be on your staff, he said. I've hired her permanently. Any retaliation, harassment, or sabotage toward her will be reported to my legal team. Colin stammered. That's, highly irregular. You know what's irregular, Nathan cut in. A hospitality director punishing the only person in this building who actually showed hospitality. Emily didn't look away. As they walked out, Derek and several staff members watched them in silence. But this time, Emily wasn't ashamed. She had been underestimated, dismissed, mocked, and she had risen anyway. She wasn't invisible anymore. That night, Emily opened her laptop. For the first time in years, she reopened her application to Columbia University. Her hands trembled as she typed, but her heart was steady. Now let us ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where speaking up changed everything? 6 months later, Emily Rivera stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling glass wall on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Behind her, a small team of interns buzzed around sleek desks. In front of her, Central Park gleamed with late-morning sunlight. And next to her, a brass plaque shimmered on the wall, Intercultural Communications Director. New York office, Beck Global. It didn't feel real. Sometimes she still woke up expecting to hear Derek's voice calling her to scrub baseboards, or the dingy light of her old apartment flickering in her face. But now she opened her eyes to emails from international clients and voice memos from Nathan Beck asking for her insight on marketing strategy in Southeast Asia. The leap hadn't been easy. Returning to Columbia took courage she wasn't sure she had. Working full-time while taking evening classes, supporting her mother's treatment, helping Sophie finish nursing school, it all took everything out of her. But Nathan's offer included tuition coverage and full medical insurance. Her mother was now seeing one of the top cardiologists at St. Grace Memorial. And Emily. She was thriving. People no longer whispered behind her back. They leaned in when she spoke. And not because of her title, but because of how she carried herself now. Quiet strength had always lived in her. The world was just finally catching up. But just when she thought her past was behind her, it came knocking again. It started with an email. Subject line request for collaboration, Astoria Grand Hotel. Emily stared at the screen. The message was from a new general manager, a woman named Caroline West. She'd recently taken over the hotel and wanted to meet about cross-cultural staff training and language strategy. Apparently, word of Beck Global's internal programs had spread. Emily hesitated. The memories were sharp. The humiliation, the whispering, the way she'd been suspended for daring to open her mouth. But she replied anyway. A week later, she walked back through the revolving doors of the Astoria Grand, not in a gray housekeeping uniform, but in a navy suit, heels, clicking confidently on the marble floor. The reception desk looked smaller, the lights dimmer than she remembered. Inside the conference room, Caroline greeted her with a smile and an apology. I've heard the stories, and what happened to you was unacceptable. Emily nodded. It wasn't just about me. It was about how invisible so many people are, until they're not. Caroline folded her hands. We'd like you to help us change that. We want to train staff in real-world cross-cultural communication, but also in respect, in seeing people fully, Emily agreed, but only under one condition. She would personally choose her team, and she had someone in mind. Her name was Rachel Kim, the former receptionist who had once brought Emily a glass of water when no one else dared speak to her. Rachel had since been let go in a budget cut, but Emily reached out, offered her a training position at Beck Global, and within 2 weeks, Rachel was thriving beside her. And then there was Derek Shaw. She ran into him outside the hotel one rainy afternoon. He looked thinner, older, still wore the same stiff posture, but his voice was quieter when he spoke. I heard about what you've done, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. Emily waited. I was wrong, he said. I don't expect forgiveness, but I see what I didn't want to. She nodded slowly. People often fear what they don't understand or what challenges their view of how the world should work. He blinked. You really believed you could become this? No, she said gently. I didn't believe. I acted like I did. That's what made the difference. She walked away that day without anger in her heart, not because he deserved it, but because she did. 1 month later, Emily was invited to speak at Columbia University's graduation ceremony as an alumna. She stood at the podium in front of hundreds of students and told the story of a woman who once cleaned hotel bathrooms by day and read German literature by night. A woman who had been overlooked, mocked, and underestimated until she stopped asking for permission to be seen. When the applause ended, a young girl with a janitor badge on her blazer approached her in tears and said, I didn't know someone like me could be someone like you. Emily smiled. You already are. You just haven't realized it yet. And that was the moment it all came full circle. As Emily left the auditorium, Nathan called to check in from Berlin. You ever wonder, he asked, how different things might have been if you'd stayed silent that day? She paused. Sometimes, but I don't regret it, because that moment, it was the beginning of everything. Now let me ask you something from the heart. Do you believe one moment of courage can change your whole life? Would you have dared to speak up if you were Emily? If her story moved something inside you? Comment 100 down below so we know you're with us. Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear which country you're in. And if this story touched you like it touched us, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless.